The air was thick with the scent of betrayal and stale coffee. My fiancé, the man whose hands I had traced with my fingers just hours ago, was in a frantic, whispered conversation on his phone. It wasn't the words that made the blood freeze in my veins. It was the raw, primal fear etched on his face. This wasn't a call with a friend. This was an exorcism of a secret so vile, it was consuming him from the inside out. He had always been so meticulously careful, a ghost in his own life, but this time he had been sloppy. On the nightstand, half hidden beneath his wallet, lay a small, intricate silver locket I had never seen before. A small tremor went through me as I reached for it. It wasn't his style. He was a creature of utility, not sentiment. I pressed the clasp. It clicked open with a soft, final sound, revealing not a photo but a tiny, folded piece of paper. My name, written in my own handwriting, was on it. But what was scrawled beneath it, in his cramped, desperate hand, was a list of names. Not just names, but cryptic usernames: Siren's Kiss, Whispering Shadow, Ghost in the Machine. The list went on for what seemed like an eternity, each name a dagger to my heart. And at the very bottom, in bold, a single phrase: last chance. The color drained from my face. I didn't need him to explain. The evidence was right there, screaming at me. The years of emotional withdrawal, the panic attacks, the sudden, inexplicable business trips that led nowhere. They weren't signs of stress or an avoidant attachment style. They were the calculated movements of a man leading a double life. Serial cheater. My fiancé, my soulmate, was a monster I had invited into my home. The psychological fallout was immediate and brutal. I felt like I was drowning in an ocean of lies. Every memory we shared, every tender moment, every promise he had ever made to me felt tainted, hollow. I was a fool, a puppet in a twisted game of deceit, and the stage was our shared life. But his secrets weren't just online fantasies. The phone call he'd just had, the frantic, panicked whispers, they were about a girl from Discord whom he had paid to meet. He had bailed at the last second, but the intention was there. The locket, the frantic whispers, the hidden list. They all pointed to a web of lies more extensive and terrifying than I could have ever imagined. My blood ran cold as a new, terrifying possibility surfaced. What if I wasn't the only victim? What if there were other women, other people whose lives he had twisted and broken with his vile games? The list of names wasn't just a record of his depravity. It was a map to a hidden world of victims, and I felt an overwhelming, bone-deep need to find them, to warn them, to bring this monster to justice. But as I clutched the locket, a dark, chilling thought emerged. What if the locket wasn't just a confession? What if it was an ultimatum, a final message from a man pushed to the brink? The last two words on the list, last chance, echoed in my mind. What did they mean? A last chance to change? Or a last chance for me to escape? And who was he talking to on the phone if not one of the women from his list? His panic, his desperate whispering, it was fear. But what was he so afraid of? It was then that a horrifying thought struck me. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of them. The women. They weren't just victims. They were players in his game, and now someone was coming for him. And I was standing right in the middle of it all. I was in too deep to run. My life, my identity, my future, it was all tangled up with his. The man I knew, the man I loved, was a masterful liar, a puppet master of emotions. He didn't just cheat, he stalked, he hunted, he played with the minds of his victims. His confession was a torrent of vile truths, each more horrifying than the last. He confessed that his sex addiction was a coping mechanism, a dark, twisted way to deal with life's stressors. But what truly chilled me was the truth behind his minor crushes and friendships. He didn't like them as people. He saw them as objects, as tools to boost his ego. He'd charm them, reel them in, and then ghost them the moment he got what he wanted. He admitted he couldn't name a single thing he liked about their personalities. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a psychological predator. He told me that his cheating was like self-harm, that he felt no genuine enjoyment from it, that it was a desperate act of self-destruction. But what about the lives he destroyed? What about the women he used and discarded? He was so consumed by his own pain he couldn't see the wreckage he was leaving in his wake. As I listened, a sinister picture began to form. He wasn't just a man with a sex addiction. He was a man with a God complex, a man who got his sick thrill from manipulating and controlling others. The sexual Discord community he ran wasn't for shared pleasure. It was a digital hunting ground where he could play out his fantasies of dominance and control, all while hiding behind a carefully constructed mask of a loving partner. The last chance on the locket wasn't a cry for help. It was a deadline. Someone was on to him. And in his confession, a chilling detail slipped out. One of the women he had paid to meet, the one he had ghosted at the last second, wasn't just another victim. She was connected to someone powerful, someone who had no patience for games. He hadn't bailed out of guilt. He had bailed because he was terrified. The panic I had seen on his face was real. And it wasn't about me. It was about her. Her name was Crimson Rose, and she was an online provocateur, a vengeful digital vigilante who was known for exposing predators like him. She had a network of spies and informants, and she was getting closer. The list in the locket wasn't just a confession. It was a ransom list. He had been given a final warning. Confess his sins to me, expose his secret life, or she would expose him to the entire world, and not just his online life but his real one, with his real name, his real job, and his real life in shambles. My mind reeled. I was no longer just a betrayed fiancé. I was now a key player in a twisted game of cat and mouse, a pawn in a battle between my fiancé and a digital avenger. I had to decide. Did I expose him myself? Or did I play along, wait for her to strike, and get my revenge? But as I considered my options, a new thought, cold and sharp, cut through the noise. What if the list wasn't a ransom list, but something far more sinister? What if the names on it weren't just victims? What if they were his accomplices? The truth was, I didn't know who this man was, and I couldn't trust anything he said. The only person I could trust was myself. But I had to move quickly. The clock was ticking. I was now a part of this game, whether I liked it or not, and I had to decide if I would be a player or a victim. The locket, my one piece of evidence, felt heavy in my hand, a bitter trophy of a battle I was only just beginning to understand. But the list held one last shocking detail. At the very bottom, in a different handwriting, were the words, "He's not the only one." The penmanship was identical to mine. I froze. Was I sleepwalking? Was I a part of this without even knowing it? A horrifying possibility began to form. Was my fiancé a part of a larger, even more sinister organization? And what did this have to do with me? I had to find out. The impossible task was clear. I had to beat a ghost at her own game. My fiancé, now a terrified and broken shell of a man, gave me the key to his digital fortress, a secret password to his most secure accounts. The task was simple yet utterly impossible. I had to find the source of Crimson Rose's network, find out who she was, and dismantle it from the inside out. My fiancé was convinced that if I did this, she would back off and our secret would be safe. He was so consumed by his own fear that he couldn't see the truth. Crimson Rose wasn't just a vigilante. She was a professional, a ghost in the digital world. And I was an amateur, a novice thrown into a game of high-stakes espionage. I had to navigate a labyrinth of encrypted chats, hidden forums, and burner accounts, all while pretending to be a part of his world, a world of twisted desires and dangerous secrets. But the deeper I went, the more horrifying the truth became. The names on the list weren't just victims or accomplices. They were bait. My fiancé and a handful of other men he was connected to weren't just cheaters. They were part of a larger, more sinister organization that preyed on unsuspecting women, luring them into a web of deceit and blackmail. The sex addiction was a lie. It was a cover story for something far more predatory. They weren't just getting their kicks. They were profiting from their victims' pain, selling their information to the highest bidder on the dark web. I found a treasure trove of evidence. screenshots of conversations, secret folders of personal photos, and a digital ledger detailing every transaction. My name was on the ledger. They had been tracking me from the very beginning. The list on the locket wasn't a list of victims or accomplices. It was a list of targets, of women they had deemed easy marks. The last chance wasn't a warning to my fiancé. It was a warning to me. A warning that I was their next target and that my time was running out. My own handwriting on the list, the words, "He's not the only one." It wasn't from me. It was a digital copy and paste from one of my old chats with my fiancé, a psychological taunt from his accomplices, a way to make me feel like I was going insane. The man I was with wasn't just a serial cheater. He was a monster, a part of a larger, more sinister web. And I was trapped. Crimson Rose, the digital avenger, wasn't just trying to expose him. He was trying to expose them all. And she was getting closer. I had to get the evidence out, but I couldn't just upload it. They would find me, silence me, and the evidence would be lost forever. I had to outsmart them, and I had to do it alone. The digital trail was a complex and dangerous labyrinth, with traps and dead ends at every turn. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that they were watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. The impossible task had just become even more impossible. I wasn't just fighting my fiancé's demons. I was fighting a whole organization of predators, and I was their next target. I was at the center of a terrifying real-life thriller, and there was nowhere left to run. But I wouldn't be a victim anymore. I would be a player. I had to save myself and expose them no matter the cost. But as I copied the last file, I heard the front door click open. I wasn't alone. The figure in the doorway wasn't one of them. It was Crimson Rose. My heart, which had been a panicked drum for the last few hours, finally slowed. She wasn't an avenger. She was a detective, a victim who had escaped their web and had dedicated her life to bringing them down. She had been tracking my fiancé for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And I, with my panicked investigation, had just provided her with the final piece of the puzzle. The digital ledger, the ultimate proof of their crimes. We worked together in a frantic, desperate race against time. We uploaded the evidence to an anonymous server, secured it with multiple layers of encryption, and sent it to every major news outlet, every law enforcement agency, and every digital rights group we could find. We had to be fast. We had to be perfect. The organization was already on high alert, and we knew they were closing in on us. The digital world became our battlefield. We faked server crashes, created ghost files, and sent them on a wild goose chase. We were two women, a betrayed fiancé and a digital vigilante, fighting against an entire organization of predators. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched, but we had one thing they didn't: the truth. As we sent the last file, the front door burst open. It wasn't them. It was the police. Crimson Rose, a master strategist, had already tipped them off, using her network of informants to confirm our location and the nature of the evidence. They stormed the apartment, and my fiancé, who had been listening in from a distance, came out with his hands up, a broken, terrified look on his face. He had confessed, but he was still a part of the crime, and now he was paying the price. Justice had been served. The organization was dismantled. The victims were safe. And I, the betrayed fiancé, was free. But the victory was bittersweet. The man I had loved, the man I had been engaged to, was a criminal. Our life, our future, our love story, it was all a lie. The happiness I thought I had was a phantom, a beautiful illusion that had shattered into a million pieces. But as I looked at the broken man who was once my fiancé, I felt no pity. Only a hollow sense of finality. He had been so consumed by his own pain, he had failed to see the people he was hurting. He had chosen this path, and now he was paying the price. I looked at Crimson Rose. She was a ghost in the digital world, a name with no face, but in that moment she was the most real person I had ever met. She was my savior. She had saved me from a life of lies, from a future with a monster. She had given me a new life, a new beginning. We were now bound by a secret, a truth that had shattered my world and in doing so had set me free. The villain had been punished. The hero had been saved. But the hero had lost everything in the process. My heart, my trust, my future, it was all gone. But in its place, a new feeling was born: resilience. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. And I was finally truly free. The locket, my key to the truth, was still clutched in my hand. I opened it one last time, looking at the faded list of names. It wasn't a list of victims or accomplices. It was a list of survivors. And at the very top, my name, once a target, was now a badge of honor. I closed the locket, a bittersweet smile on my face. The past was a closed book. The future a blank page. And for the first time in a very long time, I was excited to write it.